Hi, this video is all about recognizing arguments in an article, for example, identifying the premises and conclusion, and then evaluating the argument by referencing the premises and conclusion. So that's the learning target. Recognize an argument, recognize its premises and conclusion, and evaluate the argument based on how those premises and conclusion look and hold up under scrutiny. For this demonstration, I've chosen an article from The Economist Online. If you're not familiar with The Economist, I'd like to show you where it falls on the adfontes.com media bias chart. It's not without controversy. It was started by a woman about 7 years ago, and it got big. It went viral. The idea is now there's a staff of 20, and they take a news magazine or journal or newspaper, and they rate it in two ways. If it's 100% fact reporting, it comes out at the top, and if it contains inaccurate fabricated info, it comes out at the bottom, and if it's analysis as opposed to fact, it comes out at the middle. So you can see that The Economist right here is not so much a fact reporting paper like the AP news source, but it's more of analysis. And you can also see that as far as being left or right politically, it's somewhat in the center. This is the left, this is the right, and this is the middle line right here. So it's just slightly to the left of the middle line, according to the analysis by this particular organization. So that pretty much agrees with my experience with The Economist, so we'll go with that. But the main point is we aren't looking for news right now. We're looking for their analysis, how they make their arguments. And I find their writing very tight and short, so it's good. They're good articles for using in an analysis activity. Remember, the task for this activity is to find each argument, identify the premises and conclusion in each argument, write the argument in standard form, and then evaluate each argument. So let's get started. This is an older article. It was written in 2012, and it's about 8 short paragraphs. In the first part of your document, you'll need to make a note about each paragraph and just label it P1, P2, etc. Let's read the first paragraph. The title is Behind the Clouds, an international attempt to improve global nutrition is struggling. In April 2010, an organization, or movement as it likes to call itself, arose in the United Nations named SUN. The acronym stands for Scale Up Nutrition, and its aim was to jump on and guide a bandwagon which says that improving what people eat is the best way both to reduce hunger and poverty and to improve health, welfare, and even incomes. Its website is here. SUN gave itself 1,000 days to help improve government policies, marshal international aid, and put nutrition at the top of the development agenda. Time is running short, and to judge from a nutrition conference held this week at the Institute of Development Studies at Sussex University, does not have a lot to show for its efforts so far. So this first paragraph is more just news and reporting. It's not really an argument. It's telling me about this organization, SUN, what it's a part of, the UN, that it's got 1,000 days, time is running short. It's not really telling me, it's not making an argument. This last sentence about it doesn't have a lot to show for its efforts so far is an opinion they're putting forth, but they haven't backed it up with data yet. So this is just an introductory paragraph. It doesn't have an argument within it. So in my document and my activity, I'll just make a note that P1, paragraph 1 is an introduction. It says that the UN Scale Up Nutrition Program does not have a lot to show for its efforts so far. I'm not putting it in terms of premises and conclusions because it's not an argument. I'm just making a note what the paragraph is about. Let's look at the next paragraph. As we read this paragraph together, think about what the main argument is and what the premises are that support the argument. Here we go. Recent research confirms how much nutrition matters. In May, the Copenhagen Consensus, a group of respected economists, produced a list of the best ways to spend a notional $75 billion on improving global welfare. At the top came bundled micronutrient interventions, which means giving poor people nutrient supplements such as vitamins and iodine. Nutrition also came top of the list that the consensus drew up in 2008 as well. Its cost-benefit ratio, the economists reckon, is extraordinary. Each dollar spent on nutrition produces between $8 and $138 of benefits. Okay, what would you say is the main point of this paragraph? Or if it's an argument, what is the conclusion, the concluding statement of this entire argument? What are they trying to convince me of? Well, the argument, or rather the main point or the conclusion to the full argument, clearly is that nutrition is important, or nutrition matters. You might have written that the argument is research confirms nutrition matters, or recent research confirms nutrition matters, but it's all the same thing. Nutrition is important. Now, what are the premises that this writer is using to convince me that it's true that nutrition matters? Well, apparently there's a group of respected economists called the Copenhagen Consensus, and they've done some studies. They found a couple things. In one study, they found that bundled micronutrients are at the top of ways we should spend money. In other words, just give poor people vitamins and iodine, and that will have a big payback. And in another study, they found that each dollar spent on nutrition produces between $8 and $138 of benefits for the global economy or for a national economy. So here's how I chose to write that argument in standard form. Your wording may be different, but the ideas will be the same. The first three statements are facts that all work to support the last statement, which is the conclusion: nutrition matters to global welfare, to people's welfare. The three facts that I put in as the premises are that the Copenhagen Consensus, I spelled it wrong, is a group of respected economists, and they say they did a study, they did research, and found vitamins were the best way to go if you have a limited amount of money, and they also found that $1 spent on nutrition brings back huge amounts. So have a look at that compared to what you would have said or would have written. Please note that this argument is written in standard form. I've chosen to use the type where instead of writing premise, 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 conclusion, I just numbered it. That's because it's easy to do in Google Drive. In Google Drive, you just write down all the statements, the premises, and conclusion, and then use this number tool here, and it'll give you numbers quickly. Just make sure that you note that the last statement is a conclusion. Next paragraph. More detailed research confirms this macro picture. A group led by John Hoddinott of the International Food Policy Research Institute, a think tank in Washington, D.C., looked how 2,392 rural Guatemalan children who took part in a nutritional trial in 1969 to 1977 fared 30 years later. The study is here. Well, apparently it was linked in the original article. I don't have the link, but we could find it if we wanted. This article itself is not an argument. It's going on to tell me more about the study that Hoddinott did in the next paragraph. So I'm going to group these two paragraphs together as possibly one argument. Turns out that the benefits of better food in early childhood last a lifetime. Those who got the extra food up to 36 months, for up to 36 months in this trial here, left school later with much higher educational qualifications than those who were stunted by malnutrition. They married partners with more education. Women who were better fed as girls had fewer pregnancies and miscarriages. And the income effects were huge. The men earned 20% more, and men and women were about 1/3 less likely to live in poor households. In other words, back in the early 70s, they gave these 2,000 children, a certain group, within the 2,000 children, they gave them good nutrition, and within that group, hopefully they don't explain it here, but we will assume that there was also a matched group that did not receive the nutrition. 30 years later, they looked at how these children did with their lives. And those who had received the early childhood nutrition program had done much better on different scales. How long they stayed in school, how many miscarriages they had, what their income was. So take a look. What would you say is the main point of these two paragraphs, which would be the concluding statement of the argument? Well, you might have said that the main point is confirming the original main point of the previous paragraph, that nutrition matters. Or you might have said the benefits of better food in early childhood last a lifetime. Either one, they're basically the same thing. Those are the conclusions of these two paragraphs. Now, what would you say are the facts, the different premises, different pieces of evidence that they marshal to convince me that the benefits of better food in early childhood last a lifetime? Now, I chose to write it this way. I didn't put the fact that it's a 30-year study by Hodinott as a premise. I've sort of put that as an introduction, and then the facts that they found in the study I put as premises. But you might say a respected 30-year study was done about the effect on children. That would be your first one. Then the second one, the study showed children married better educated partners and also were better educated themselves. I didn't put that in, which I should have. Study showed children had fewer pregnancies and miscarriages. Studies showed that men earned 20% more. Studies showed men and women were 33% less likely to live in poor households. All the people who received nutrition had all these good things. And each one is a fact, and each one would then become a premise to support my conclusion that I saw, which nutrition matters, or the benefits of childhood nutrition are far-reaching. So this is the basic idea, and note that I had to combine two paragraphs to get a complete argument. Paragraph 5 is a little bit different. It says, so why aren't nutritional projects everywhere? Partly because the beneficiaries of nutritional programs tend to be poor, and in many countries, the poor are politically marginal. And partly because nutrition is an intrinsically difficult problem for governments to grapple with, since it involves health, agriculture, sanitation, and welfare. As a book from 1987 put it, malnutrition is nobody's main responsibility. Government officials have no ministry to turn. Nor does any United Nations organization have a primary mandate to help countries. SUN, which is linked to the UN Security General's Office, was set up to deal with the second problem. The other problems remain and are proving hard to address. What is the conclusion or the main point of this paragraph? And what is the argument? Find the conclusion, find the premises. Well, the conclusion, the main point, is hidden in this rhetorical question here. Why aren't nutritional projects everywhere? In other words, nutritional projects are not everywhere. And here they're going to say are some of the reasons. So the conclusion is nutritional projects are not widespread. The question why will point us to all the premises of that argument. But note that this is an argument that is not giving me facts to convince me that nutritional projects are not everywhere. They're not trying to convince me of that fact. They're assuming that I'm going to take that fact for granted, and now they're going to try to explain to me why that fact is true. So it's a different type of argument. This is an explanation-based argument, where the previous arguments were evidence-based arguments. And happily, with this particular paragraph, we have some premise indicators. Because again, and then there's nor, which means a third because, right? It's just kind of adding on one more. So why aren't nutritional projects everywhere? Because the poor are politically marginal in many places, because it's a program that kind of gets spread through different departments in a government, so nobody really takes responsibility for it, and because the UN doesn't have a nutrition department. This SUN program is just a program within the Security General's Office. Let's see what that looks like on my document. So here is the standard form of this explanation-based argument, and you can read it at your leisure. But notice that as I write my arguments in standard form, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not cutting and pasting exactly from the article. I'm using phrases from the article, but writing it in a way that I can understand the argument clearly, and I can clearly see the premises and the conclusion. Next paragraph. In the aftermath of the 2007 to 2008 food price spike, poor countries and rich donors started to make noises about increasing the attention they gave to nutrition. Britain, for instance, now spends about a quarter of its aid on nutritional programs, far more than it used to. The group of 8 richest countries promised millions of extra dollars to improve food security in poor countries, a promise that could have been used to raise nutritional standards. So this could be a mini argument. The argument is the donors started to make noises. People, both the countries and donors, started to talk about nutrition, and then the evidence, the premise would be Britain as an example and the group of 8 rich countries as an example. But I chose to combine these two paragraphs into one argument. So let's read the next one. But there has been little follow through. Aid for nutrition was still only $500 million in 2010, a fraction of the roughly $3 billion spent on emergency food aid or basic health care. America and the European Commission still spend only 10% of their aid on basic nutrition. Britain is an outlier. And developing countries are not much better. A survey in 2008 found that most of them are ignoring basic nutritional policies that are known to work, such as zinc supplements and conditional cash transfer programs. Even when they do adopt effective interventions, such as promoting breastfeeding, the policies are often not actually carried out. So, as combining these two paragraphs, I'm going to say that the conclusion is people have begun talking about nutrition, but there's been little follow through. And then my premises will be the different pieces of evidence of people beginning to talk about nutrition, Britain and the group of 8, and also that there's been very little follow through, and there's about 3 facts in here showing me that there's been little follow through. So a couple facts about talking, about 3 facts about not following through, and the conclusion will be there's been a lot of talk, but not much follow through. And here's how I chose to summarize paragraphs 6 and 7 in one standard form argument. 3 premises, but a couple of the premises have mini premises within. Number 1, some countries say they will give more to nutrition. A, Britain spends 25% of foreign aid on nutrition. B, a group of 8 rich countries pledge to spend millions. Second premise, but in 2010, only 17% of world food aid went to basic nutrition. Third premise, a 2008 study showed developing countries don't get strongly behind nutrition. Sub-premise 1, they don't adopt proven nutrition policies such as zinc supplementation. B, if they adopt policies, they don't carry them out. Conclusion, there has been little follow-through on nutrition studies or nutrition programs. Could have been, there has been some talk, but little follow-through on nutrition studies and nutrition programs. Either one would be fine. Finally, the last paragraph. Sun's 1,000-day deadline runs out in February 2013 and needs some results soon if the impetus behind improving nutrition is not to peter out. The potential benefits of scaling up nutrition are not to be wasted. This again is just a concluding statement about Sun, but you'll notice that the whole article wasn't about Sun. We didn't learn anything about what Sun did or didn't do. This article was really about nutrition. So again, P8, just conclusion, not an argument. Sun needs to get moving if its efforts are not to be wasted. So let's quickly take a moment to review some tips for the first part of the assignment, which we just completed, identifying the arguments, the premises, the conclusions in the article. Don't rush it. You have to list all the premises you found and the conclusion for each argument. You can combine 2 paragraphs into one argument if that makes sense, and paraphrase. Use phrases from the article. Don't simply cut and paste. Try to use conversational wording that makes sense to you. So now most of the hard work is done, and in the next much shorter video, we'll go over how to write an analysis of each of the arguments, a short analysis of each of the arguments. See you there.